I'm going to start, if I may, with you, James, because when we were on, we got a tour of the Celtic Explorer last night. We were very privileged. And on the screen while we were there, the captain pointed out to us this fantastic thing that looked like a beetle on the top of the water, and it's your craft. So you're an explorer. I just wanted to ask what difference that sort of autonomous craft is going to make to the way that we study, observe the oceans.
Yeah, so I think the way that we would look at this is very much following the last presentation. If we're going to see a doubling in the ocean economy, 1.5 trillion to 3 trillion, we would feel that what needs to underpin that is data. You can't make informed decisions about any aspect of, be it industrial, fisheries. You need data, and to collect that data, we feel we need to transform the way that data is collected. We need to reduce the cost, we need to increase the volume, and so we feel that, and we would see a big distinction between an unmanned vessel and an autonomous vessel. We feel that there's technology that is needed to make that step in terms of data that's required.
Okay, I'm a total ignoramus. Tell me the difference between an autonomous vehicle and an unmanned or womaned vehicle.
Yeah, so the way we would see it is that it's how the vessel makes decisions. So an autonomous vessel is a vessel that is sent out to sea, and it makes decisions. If it sees a fishing boat or a ship, it makes decisions whether to go left or right or to stop. We feel that's a little bit further away. So what we are is what's called an unmanned vessel. So effectively what we've done is we've taken the officer of the watch that's normally on the bridge of the vessel, and we've put them in an office. And we still give them all the same information, the camera feeds, all of the transponder feeds, all of the information that a person sitting on the boat would normally have, but we've moved that person into an office. And using a satellite connection, we've got real-time control over the vessel. So we still have a human in the loop that's actually controlling the vessel.
But still that means that there has to be a human controlling it all the time.
Correct.
How far are we from a point where these sort of vessels can do their own work?
I'm not really sure that the important thing is being able to get the data collected. And so having the human in the loop, I think, is a really important step, and I think that's going to remain for quite some considerable time. But it doesn't affect the way that we can collect the data. We can still collect the data in large volumes using unmanned vessels.
And, I mean, how good are we in this country at this sort of technology? Is that little beetle craft that you have really the cutting edge?
Well, it's an emerging sector, and I guess what we're seeing, I mean, the ocean is an enormous place. 71% of the globe is covered in water, so it's a massive, massive sector. We're seeing that there are companies in the US, there's companies in the UK that are developing technologies, but different technologies are needed for different aspects of it. So if you're going to send a craft out into the middle of the Pacific Ocean for months on end, that's different to the type of craft that we've developed. Our craft you could send out for, say 3 weeks at a time, operating 24 hours a day, but we're able to carry the sensors, these sort of industrial grade sensors that are required to do, for example, fisheries surveys or bathymetric surveys, and collect huge quantities of data.
And are they made here, and how much do they cost?
Well, we make them here, and what we're seeing is that we think that we can reduce the cost of ocean data collection by a third compared to conventional means. We've just literally, as you quite rightly said, we've just returned from actually 2 weeks at sea with our vessel. We've been doing a fisheries survey with the Marine Institute, who've been a fantastic partner in this. So we fitted an industrial grade Simrad EK80 fisheries sonar onto our vessel, and we've been collecting, I think we collected 110 gigabytes of fisheries data, plus on top of that a huge volume of video data, so monitoring marine mammals, seen minke whales, seen hundreds of dolphins, and all that data is now actually being downloaded off the vessel, and we can now get into the analysis of that. It's been a herring survey that we've been involved in.
Well, sitting beside you, Gordon Johnston, why is it, I know it's important to map the sea, but why?
That's a very good question. And I think it's one that we often get asked, and we don't necessarily have a complete answer because we don't necessarily know exactly what's down there. And as James has said, data is key. We need more data. And actually, there's another side to the question, which is does anyone actually think we shouldn't map the oceans properly? And I've not met many people that think that we shouldn't, but it's not always easy for us to give them a complex or a clear answer as to why. But essentially, for an integrated ocean, it's an ocean of things. You know, we talk about the Internet of Things, but we already have this integrated dynamic environment, the ocean, and we need to better understand it. We need to better be able to measure it and plan and manage that resource. And I think for those reasons, the seabed mapping and EORA and the Atlantic Seabed Mapping Initiatives represent a means to develop strategies to understand and put together plans, identify where we can go and do the surveys, and provide a baseline and a foundation and a catalyst for putting the plans and the innovation and the tools in the water. Where would we put them? How do we prioritize that? So it's important for us to do that mapping.
Because something like only 5%, I think, of the seabed has been mapped. But am I right in thinking that actually in Ireland, we've been a bit ahead of the game in terms of mapping our own waters?
Ireland is a leader in seabed mapping for sure. You have the expertise.
We love to hear that. We love to hear that, yes.
You have the expertise, you have a comprehension that it's important. That's been ongoing for decades now, really. And only recently, really, have the tools been more available for people to take that technology and use it in other parts of the oceans, and show other countries what is possible and what the benefits are. So it is important, and I think Ireland provides a leadership in that sense for seabed mapping, for sure.
Okay. They've given me a mic because seemingly we have a hearing problem at the very end that has been spotted. Michael, thank you very much. Yeah, and I think it might be partly the gale that's blowing, you see, from the air conditioner, and it makes it difficult, funnily enough, to hear up here. But now there's something called a bathymetric chart. I hesitate over it, Gordon, because I'm not familiar with it. But I gather what it does, what bathymetrics do, is that you're actually mapping the contours of the ocean bed. And is this technology something that we're using right now? And what difference will it make?
So yes, the technologies are available now. Multi-beam systems, satellite-derived bathymetry, LiDAR, laser systems. For different water depths, different tools get used, and different platforms. James's autonomous surface vessel, there are underwater vehicles as well, and the traditional hull-mounted systems. So the mapping technology is there, but it's being developed. Accurate positioning has really only been around for about the last 20 years. Motion sensors to compensate for some of the sensor technology, that's really only been around maybe 10, 15 years at an accurate level. So the innovation, the technology drivers have enabled us to do better. Yeah. And I think they will continue to do that. And we've got things like the Ocean Discovery, the X Prize initiatives that push innovators, push scientists to provide us with more tools and better tools, more efficient tools.
And again, this is something that we can actually help with.
Absolutely, absolutely. The drivers, and we heard Claire and Minister Creed yesterday said an important thing about we need a joined-up approach. And I think we bring technology developers and innovators together with those that have maybe the operational experience, together with people that may benefit and the stakeholders. And I think the technology is an enabler for that, for sure.
Well, Noel, sitting beside you, Noel is from the Insight Centre for Data Analytics. It always terrifies me when I read phrases like data analytics, but I presume, Noel, it basically means analysing data.
Yeah, it's effectively the idea of dealing with the challenges that that Gordon and James have outlined, which is the sheer volume of data that's now available across multiple different application domains, and the marine sector is a fantastic example of that. The richness of the data that both Gordon and James referred to presents significant challenges in terms of how we handle that data, how we process that data, and how we interpret that data with a view to making better decisions in whichever context.
Can you give us an example of how you were able to use all sorts of data to come to a practical conclusion. I think you have a story about Croke Park.
Yeah, Croke Park is the Smart Stadium project that I head up in collaboration with Intel and Microsoft, hosted by the GAA. And it's the idea of taking a test bed, an urban test bed in this case, instrumenting it with a whole variety of different sensors that produce different types of data sources, and then using that data to make better informed decisions around everything from crowd congestion, crowd understanding, to efficient usage of light and heat and water within a stadium context, right? And I think what's interesting about that is the amount of infrastructure we have to put in place in what's already quite a well-instrumented infrastructure to generate data. And as we've heard yesterday and this morning from our speakers, in actual fact, in our oceans, that data is already being generated. So the learnings that we can take from initiatives like smart cities and smart communities are now ready to be deployed in the marine sector.
So what sort of problems did you help to solve in Croke Park?
From the use case perspective, you mean? Well, a whole variety of problems that you wouldn't necessarily associate with a stadium, in fact. So one of the big ones is understanding crowd movements, crowd control from a health and safety perspective. Usage of electricity within the stadium for the large heat lamp rigs that they use to stimulate turf care. That's a significant cost to the stadium owners and replicated across stadiums all over the world. Flooding, believe it or not, Jones's Road is prone to flooding, so technology can help there through sensorizing the sewer system, for example, and getting early warning of potential flooding events. Retail, the idea of the shopping experience as part of your experience of visiting a stadium, either for a large sporting event or for a concert, for example. So I think what's really interesting is all these different opportunities where technology can be injected to make a difference. Either socially or economically or socio-economically or even culturally, for example. And I think it's a great model of how we can establish these kinds of test beds in Ireland to help drive forward our research agenda and also our economic agenda.
So how would that help, say, in the efforts to harness sustainable energy or have a sustainable approach to fish stocks?
I think it's all about the data, as we've heard from our previous speakers, and the challenges there are the volume of data that's coming at us, the velocity at which the data needs to be processed, and very often in a marine sector context, you want to know the information when you gather it, or as soon after you gather it as possible. And then there's the variability of the data. Okay, so there's data that's everything from autonomous drones, seabed surveys, to satellite data, to sensors in the water, to crowdsourced data from the public. So how do we take all of these different data sets, merge them, normalize them, and then feed them into the next generation of machine learning approaches, artificial intelligence approaches, to enable us to make better decisions?
How good are we in Ireland at that, or is there a lot we could learn from other countries?
I think thanks to the investment in data, big data, machine learning and AI, but the likes of Science Foundation Ireland, Enterprise Ireland and so on, and through partnerships between centres like Insight, our own Water Institute in DCU, for example, the Marine Institute and the IMDO, I think we're very good in Ireland at adopting this joined-up approach that we've spoken about. Together we're better in Ireland. We are a small nation at the end of the day. It's possible to bring people from different domains together. I think that's our key unique selling point in this sector as in other sectors, and I think we're effectively ahead of the game, quite frankly, globally.
Yeah. Do you mean in terms of being a small country and therefore being able to pull people together?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can I turn to Felix, who's sitting beside you, Felix Leinemann? The EU, to what extent does it support ocean technology and improved access to marine data? Is that a really important element of blue growth, as they call it, in Europe?
Yes, certainly so. We heard yesterday about the anniversary of the Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance, and a big part of that is already gathering data, putting data together, mapping the seafloor, so that's part of it. There are other research projects that try, for example, to build e-infrastructures to put research institutes together, or that use satellite data for coastal monitoring and coastal observation. We have also something called the European Marine Observation and Data Network, EMODNet, which processes data from more than 150 scientific institutes across all over Europe and makes these available to anyone who wants to use them. So it's publicly available, it's combined with a map, and that can be used by anyone. And we are now entering...
And are we using it? Is Irish business using it? Are we using it enough?
We hear more and more that business are using it. I'm not sure whether they are using it enough. We certainly hope so. We think it's been put together with a relatively modest budget, let's say, and we are improving it gradually. So we are now in the third phase where we increase the, for example, the data density for the seafloor. And for example, we hear that dredgers are using it when they program where they are going to dredge or what they need to do. In front of the French coast, with the higher density, suddenly they discovered a 6-meter deep trench that was a underwater dune in the water. And the cable layers, for example, hadn't thought about that before. They didn't even know it was there. So for cable layers, dredging industry, for others, that's something that is important for them. Yeah. And here in the exhibition, there's a project DBC, a modeling of underwater noise, for example. And when I asked the guy, do you know about EmoteNet? Oh yes, I love it. I use it all the time. So there are businesses that are using it, and we hope that more and more of this can actually happen.
Well, Vincent, is it McKey or McKay? It's McKey as in McKey Barracks.
That's it, well, yeah.
Gotcha. Vincent, and of course you're IBM Ireland. Talk to us about blockchain, what it is and how we can use it.
Yeah, this is a question I get quite asked frequently. What is blockchain and what does it mean? Blockchain is basically a distribution ledger, same as your finance. It tracks and records transactions, and it also tracks assets in a business network. And what does that mean? Effectively, multiple industries who are paper-based or who are process-driven can reduce the transaction times, the cost of transacting, the cost of moving materials from one location to another using blockchain, where they all are connected together, whether it be through smart contracting, smart documentation, smart movement of the goods themselves. So blockchain allows for that transaction in an open, secure, transparent way for industries who want to have access to certain elements of that documentation, whether it be customs, revenue, whether it be industry, whether it be finance, etc., have access to that information on a need-to-know basis, but allows transactions to happen through different time zones, nearly in real time, but the information is there. There's one documentation or one path of information that's available.
And is the security element, the fact that it's a very secure way of exchanging information, is that one of the vital elements of it?
It's one of the vital elements of it, and it's basically any changes or any updates or anybody who tries to interfere or make any changes to the documentation itself, it's recorded and it's there available for everybody to see what has happened. So any movement or any documentation, wording changes, cost changes, etc., are all tracked and are all transparent, and it can't be changed unless everybody agrees for that change to happen. So it's really sort of connecting everybody together from an industry perspective to really sort of fast track through paper-driven organizations that are like, could be maintenance records, could be anything like that, that sort of, reduce the time, have the information readily available, not to have to wait for paperwork to come in, to be processed, etc., etc. So it's really trying to cut down on that documentation process as much as possible, as an example.
And what stage is that technology at now? Do you see it being even more powerful and useful in 10 years' time?
One way it has been described is like the internet. You access the internet now, you can get all the information there. With blockchain, you'll be able to access it, but in a secure environment, to information that you're available or have access to. What will actually happen is, over time, it will start become more and more used in everyday transactions. At the moment, it's specifically industry or enterprise driven, but it will come a time where it will go down to the householder, like, deeds of properties, property registration, etc., is one area that's been looked at the present moment. So that's going to go into the consumer itself. But at the moment, it's been mostly pushed out into the finance area, transportation area, to sort of, how can we benefit from that? And then over time, it will trickle its way down to the consumer itself.
Well, Michael Jones, you're president of the Maritime Alliance in San Diego, which promotes sustainable science-based ocean and water industries. So can you take a broader view, looking across at what everybody has said here? we're conscious in Ireland that we do have the advantage of having a cluster of high-tech, IT-type industries here. In terms of developing and using the sort of technology which will promote a blue economy, how are we fixed, and to what extent do you think that sort of cluster aspect helps us?
So from an economic point of view, a cluster is a naturally occurring community of common interest. Typically when we talk about a cluster, we're really talking about where recognition, funding, and leadership come together. So you're talking about an organized cluster. And Ireland is, I would say, in the process of really organizing its national cluster. We in San Diego, the general wisdom is you need about 50 companies minimum in order to sustain a business cluster. We have a couple hundred companies in San Diego, so we're a much bigger concentrated region. But as we look around the world, we helped put together a Blue Tech Cluster Alliance, and each of those clusters are different, what they focus on, but they have many similarities, and their typical similarity is where they work on the triple helix. So they're bringing together academia, industry, and then policymakers, not just government, but press, NGOs, military, and then they sit right at the intersection to try and make sure that academia is tech transferring into industry, that industry is talking to academia to ensure that they're working together and creating value for citizens. Likewise, that government understand what the impediments are and how to work together. So a cluster plays a very important role. You have here a strategy which most countries don't have, a national strategy, which is a tremendous advantage. And within that strategy, the Marine Institute, and then now the Marine Development Team that's been developing, I think is increasingly playing a economic business development role, which is very important. And Claire made the comment that a lot of these newer structures have been within the last 5 years. And while there are some older clusters, and certainly the EU has done a lot of work in this field, I would say that most of the ocean tech clusters are 5 to 7 years old. We are in our 12th year, but we're older than most. And so we're seeing a lot of momentum, and I think Ireland's really at the same time showing a lot of momentum and playing off its advantages.
So we could be an influential member of a digital ocean cluster.
You have multiple advantages. I mean, you have deep water, you are an IT-based area with IBM and others, the Smart Bay concept. You have one of the largest EEZs in the world. You know, this 10-to-1 ratio that was mentioned earlier. And having a strategy and really focusing on something is a tremendous opportunity. Your gene pool is small. I mean, you have a small population base. And so the only way you're going to really be able to project is be international. And so being part of an international coalition and not just with EU, but I think really projecting internationally is very important. As other countries, you know, the Americas, Africa, also want to develop clusters, Ireland could use its expertise and its capabilities to also provide development aid to other countries as they develop clusters, and thereby create linkages between Ireland and other countries. So there's a lot of things that can be done based on what you already have.
So do you think we could be in a position to attract the sort of international investment in developing technology here?
Absolutely. You know, there's
or
always...
is there anything, do you think, we're doing that's putting them off?
You know, I won't claim to be an expert in all the areas Irish. I would say that there's perhaps hasn't been enough of the international posture. There's been a very big regional posture, but we don't see the Irish necessarily internationally as much. So I would say attracting students here and then helping create clusters and having relationships with clusters around the world, I think is something that is just developing. You're not behind, so to speak, but I think you could play a leading role in doing that. You know, we say that small countries sometimes punch above their weight. You know, we talk about a New Zealand or an Ireland, and depending on what sector they're in and how they position themselves, that opportunity certainly exists.
Felix, in terms of perhaps what we could do, what more could we do to attract international investment here in terms of developing the technology?
I would concur with Michael saying that there is a lot happening, but I don't see many international people here. For example, at this conference, there was somebody from Portugal yesterday. There are good links with Canada, with the United States, but there is maybe a bit of a lack of international cooperation that could be, or not a lack, but it could certainly be increased in this sense.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's something we really need to try hard at. Noel?
Yeah, I mean, think about Ireland's IT sector and where we've punched above our weight in the past. I think one of the key factors that influences that inward investment and location of international companies here is access to talent, the talent pipeline coming through our university sector, right? And I think as we become more advanced in terms of the technology that we're applying to different domains, we need to produce not just graduates fresh out of college and not just master's students, but increasingly we need PhD graduates who are well versed in industry and able to slingshot into that. And I think that's one of the areas that perhaps has received less attention in the past, where a lot of the funding mechanisms for working with industry have focused on shorter term projects with shorter term horizons with a view to producing intellectual property that can be licensed. And arguably we've let the human capacity aspects slide a little bit, but I'm delighted to say that that's now being addressed. Recently, Science Foundation Ireland launched their call for centres for research training, which will produce up to 300 PhD students well versed in data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, that can slingshot into these sectors that are of growing importance, like sustainability and like the marine sector. I think it's a very, very, very positive step for Ireland.
So, Noel, are you daring to say that universities should go back to teaching?
I think well, we always teach, by the way, in case my boss is in the audience.
But taking the longer
view. So I think in PhD level education, the traditional approach has been the master and the apprentice, right? And that's not sufficient to fulfill the needs of industry. We can't produce enough PhD level graduates to go into Irish industries at the moment. So what we need is a different approach. So these new centres for research training that SFI will fund are built upon a cohort model. So this is where you could have up to 30 people all looking at different aspects of, for example, data analytics in the marine sector, who are being trained in a slightly different way to the way in which we would typically train PhD graduates. It's not just about 4 years of esoteric, very academic research. It's about that, and it's about publishing papers and world-class science, but it's also about training those people with the transferable skills that industry need, such as understanding intellectual property, project management, budget management, and so on and so forth, so that we have a new wave of graduates coming out of our universities who are ready to go straight into industry.
Vincent, do you see that as a lack? Do we need to work a bit harder on the training and education side?
I think we have a good relationship here, a good ecosystem. Industry and universities work very, very well together. I think it's a great observation that Michael has made here, where we're in our familiar territory with Canada and the United States. I think we need to push above our own weight. I think we need to promote ourselves a bit more. I think we need to get more out there as to what we're doing and the good stuff that's going on here. And I think we not just need to do it in Ireland, we need to do it abroad as well. But there is a great relationship. I do agree with Noel when he talks about the universities and the students. I think it's a partnership rather than a student and a faculty leader. And we've seen that with that, and it's been quite successful from our perspective in attracting foreign direct investment here to Ireland, and one of the key milestones in our success over the last 10 years. But it's very important that we just don't become insular. We need to get out there. We need to promote Ireland as a location for this type of activity.
But the IDA is doing it all the time. I mean, they do work very hard at that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a government agency that we have a lot of affiliation to. They've been very positive to us. They've opened a lot of doors to other industries to come into Ireland. Again, it's not the them and us situation. It's a partnership. We're all in it to make it successful. And I think having these contacts and working groups within universities and across the sea is very much beneficial. But we got to keep going at that, and we got to keep pushing ourselves so that we can do more. We can do more.
Gordon, in terms of what we could do, the areas maybe where we're just not working hard enough, would training and education be one of them? What sort of downsides do you see?
Well, I think first of all there are upsides in terms of.
We've been talking about those. I just wanted to mention some of the others. Yeah.
So, the downside is you miss out, the next generation miss out on the good work that we're doing at the moment. If you don't have sufficient STEM students and pupils coming through, then essentially the innovation and the momentum that you have now will falter. And other countries will take on some of those potential roles. So I think it's important that from schooling through university, you promote both the ocean as an enterprise, but you find ways to apply the science and the STEM subject matter. There are little standards out there that deal with oceanographic and hydrographic types of operations and surveys, but the current market is absolutely desperate for talented young people to move in and take over from us who are getting older and can't be here forever.
Yeah, so maybe there needs to be more direction within the education system itself.
I think there are opportunities to join some of that up, so that there is a more of a process involved, and also there are international cooperation opportunities as well, whether it's through Europe or through broader international partnerships. Yeah.
James, you're the one who actually makes things.
Yeah.
So you're right in there in terms of the technology and developing what's available. So looking at Ireland, and there are good sides,
Yeah.
we do have advantages, but are there things that we're not doing that we should be doing?
Yeah, do you know, it's listening to the conversation here. We had a meeting yesterday evening with Michael and a number of people, and I think one of the things we recognised as a sort of a smaller company at the sort of technology sharp end, we as a company should be doing more on the international stage. We should be interacting more with international parties, and that's something I think we're taking away from this summit. But on the flip side to that, I think the ecosystem that exists here in Ireland is incredibly supportive. As a company, we would be a high potential startup with Enterprise Ireland, so we've received tremendous support across a number of areas with Enterprise Ireland. But then you've got the likes of the facilities down at Lear, the wave tank facilities. You've got the Marine Institute have been unbelievably supportive in providing us the environment where we can deploy our technology, test our technology with real subject matter experts and real assets like the Celtic Explorer that we can do sort of back-to-back survey studies with. So I think, yeah, our takeaway, we can do more on the international side, but there's a great ecosystem here in Ireland.
Yeah. And if you were to look at another country that we could learn from, can you mention one?
Do you know, I often look at the international stage, and I have to say that when I've looked at sort of a country for a startup, I think the two countries that stand out, one is New Zealand. I think New Zealand offers tremendous support for developing new companies and new innovation. I think on a par with that is Ireland. I think Ireland does have a tremendous ecosystem for supporting the development of new technology and new business. So, and that's a really good reason for us to be here.
Yeah. And Michael, can you think of another country that we can learn from, you with your international view of these things?
Sure. The country that we're probably watching the closest right now is Norway, because of the national strategy they have. 2 years ago, we asked Marine Institute to provide a keynote speaker at our gala at our Blue Tech Week. Last year it was Norway, because they have a new national strategy. They also have the largest sovereign fund in the world, and so they're applying funding into their cluster networks. They have funding to go abroad, and although they have Innovation Norway, they actively want their clusters to go elsewhere, and I compare that to IDA, which does a wonderful job representing Ireland and has been nice enough to support some of our events, but that's not the same as having the clusters there who know the companies very, very clearly. So I think you need to have both. And on the education side, there's no question that Ireland has a wonderful reputation on the higher education side. We're trying to drive it all the way down to kindergarten. And we're working with our local unified school district, and they're going to start Tinker Space using Legos at kindergarten. And then they're going to have makerspace in 5th grade, as opposed to kids getting to middle school and high school and saying, gosh, what's STEM? we're really driving it all the way down, and we're going to use blue tech as the unifying theme throughout. And that'll allow a lot more kids to get to the higher education and say, wow, I've got to be involved in the ocean in some way.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience in that whole area of technology? Because I think we may even have a roving mic, do we? Okay, there's somebody there. Yes?
Yeah. At the moment, marine technical developments are not on the IDA list, and the amount of money and support given to overseas software and pharmaceutical companies is an order of magnitude of that given to small indigenous startup companies in Ireland. So what we would like to do or see as a small startup company in the marine sector is the same level of funding that's given by the IDA to external companies coming into Ireland, and not treat us companies in Ireland as mere distribution for foreign direct investment. And if you benchmark the level of investment given to small companies in Ireland against our direct competitors in France and Germany and the USA, we're talking almost an order of magnitude. So we really would like a difference in approach and matching the funding that the IDA shower on foreign direct investment compared to what's available to companies in Ireland. And it's very few companies that are given the same level of support. And benchmarking would be a very good start.
Okay, yeah, fair point. Is there anybody else who wants to get a point in? Anybody with their hand up there?
Response to the speaker, I don't know if you've had experience of engaging with the Enterprise Ireland Innovation Partnership scheme. We've had very good experience in DCU of working through that programme. It's where Enterprise Ireland will subsidise the cost of an R&D project with an Irish SME, a high-tech Irish SME, to the tune of 80% of the cost of that project. We found that a very useful mechanism for engaging in a meaningful way with Irish SMEs. So I'm not sure if you've had an experience of that programme. If not, it's absolutely something I think you should have a look at.
Okay. Right.
There isn't a benchmark, and there is just a mismatch. And the university, the business school and the University of Cork have pointed this out, and there doesn't seem much happening. So if something could come out of this event that says, let's benchmark the level of support given to FDI compared to the level of support, because Enterprise Ireland has great programs, but they're small compared to that applied to external companies, and particularly in the marine sector, and we don't know why.
Okay, well, that's a fair point to end on. Perhaps we do need to benchmark Indigenous companies versus FDI. I just want to thank our panel this morning and to let you all go to your coffee, but to be back here at 11:30 for another really interesting area, which is the whole business of Ireland developing, and maybe not in Dublin, a maritime financial hub. Thank you.